Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Tulsi Gabbard has rejected the allegation that she mishandled a complaint against her. Mehmet says that the fraud in Maine's Medicaid is a lot like the fraud in Minnesota. Will Sinai Takaichi team up with President Trump to take on the CCP? And what's up with Keir Starmer? Okay, let's get into it. A federal jury in Massachusetts convicted a Colombian woman who lived illegally in Boston for more than 20 years using a stolen identity. Prosecutors said that Lena Maria Orovio Hernandez collected over $400,000 in stolen benefits, and she used a false identity to vote in the 2024 presidential election. Authorities said that she used the stolen identity in order to obtain a Massachusetts real ID along with 8 other state IDs. And she also used the fake identity to apply for a U.S. passport. After a 5-day federal trial in Boston, the jury convicted her on multiple charges, including identity theft, false statements tied to a social security number and a U.S. passport application, receiving stolen government funds, and fraudulent voting.
We're talking about a 59-year-old illegal immigrant who's been in the country for years, stole someone else's identity, and then voted in the 2024 presidential election. Take a look at this photo here. This is Lena Maria Orovio Hernandez. In this picture, you can see her, Martha, wearing that I voted sticker that we all get when we go to cast our ballots. She's also convicted of stealing $400,000, as you mentioned, in benefits. She apparently used her fake identity to obtain multiple state IDs and also a passport.
Massachusetts attorney Leah Foley described the crime as a slap in the face to all those who came into this country legally and who abide by the laws. Foley said that the case shows the government's commitment to enforcing immigration laws and protecting U.S. citizens. Sean Rice, a federal agent with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, said that the actions of Hernandez were deliberate and not accidental. Rice said that the more than $400,000 in stolen federal benefits by Hernandez included over $250,000 in HUD rental assistance that is meant for low-income, disabled, and elderly Americans. And officials say that similar schemes are now under review in other states. Mehmet Oz, the Trump administration's top official for Medicare, has suggested that alleged fraud in Maine's social services programs may be on par with the welfare fraud scandal in Minnesota. In an interview on the radio program The Cats Roundtable yesterday morning, Oz said that there's another big crisis concerning alleged social services fraud in Maine. He said, it turns out that Maine looks a lot like Minnesota, and Maine's fraud cases are also linked to the state's Somali population. He wrote to Maine Governor Janet Mills about these concerns and said that it's troubling if the state doesn't act. A whistleblower, Christopher Bernardini, exposed Medicare fraud at Gateway Community Services, which is a Maine health services contractor, last December. Bernardini worked at Gateway Community Services from May 2018 to April 2025 as a program coordinator. Bernardini alleges that Gateway oversaw a system in which false records were filed about client visits. He stated that the electronic monitoring system, which was intended to track movement, was manipulated to make it appear as if the field crews had visited low-income and physically challenged clients, but in fact, they had not even been within a few miles of their homes. Gateway then charged taxpayers for services that were never actually performed. Bernardini's allegations have received considerable attention from conservative media in Maine. The state Republican called for an investigation into whether there was any misuse or waste of taxpayer funds. State Senator Matt Harrington told News Nation, I demanded a full investigation when I heard initial reporting about this welfare fraud scandal last May. Harrington also criticized Democratic Governor Janet Mills's administration over the issue. Harrington said, the Mills administration has neglected obvious and credible reports of Somali-linked systemic fraud in the Maine care system. This is an outrageous betrayal of Maine taxpayers. Oz said that 90% of the health care benefit fraud that was found so far has been related to Somali residents. So, similar fraud may be occurring in other Somali neighborhoods in the United States, and Oz said, "We're going to keep fighting and looking for these fraudulent expenses because it's ripping money out of the hands of our most vulnerable. We estimate there's $100 billion of fraud coming out of the programs that administer Medicare, Medicaid, and the like." Oz also named California, saying that there are a lot of problems there too. Oz recently visited areas of Los Angeles County where hospice organizations are located.
So you can see these are medical buildings. They've got Cyrillic writing, Russian, Armenian writing. On both sides, there's lots of action, it seems. I don't know how many patients are getting care, but in this 4-block area in Los Angeles, there are 42 hospices. So either there are a lot of people dying here, or you've got a fraudulent activity that is so good that everyone wants to get in on it.
In a press conference, Oz disclosed that the number of end-of-life facilities in the Los Angeles area has increased 7-fold since 5 years ago. About $3.5 billion in fraud has been committed, and many of these facilities, it turns out, are run by the mafia. In a major trial last year, 5 masterminds defrauded Medicare of nearly $16 million by laundering money under the guise of running a hospice agency. Oz said that there was no one at the facility and no services were being provided.
There wasn't anyone really in there. They weren't doing any services. They just got an address they could claim was a hospice, and then they ran the business claiming people were at home getting services, which they really weren't. What we have learned is there's roughly $3.5 billion of fraud taking place here in Los Angeles in hospice and home care.
Over the weekend, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, denied any wrongdoing in connection with a whistleblower complaint that was filed against her last May. The whistleblower's lawyer accused Tulsi Gabbard's office of deliberately delaying the complaint, but her office denied the allegations as baseless and politically motivated. At the same time, Democrats are questioning why it took so long for the complaint to be sent to Congress. Senator Mark Warner, who is the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said last week that the law requires whistleblower complaints to be sent to Congress within 21 days, and he suggested that the delay was an attempt to bury the complaint. In response, Gabbard wrote in a lengthy X post on Saturday, and she denied his claims. Gabbard wrote, "Senator Mark Warner and his friends in the propaganda media have repeatedly lied to the American people that I, or the ODNI, hid a whistleblower complaint in a safe for 8 months. This is a blatant lie." Gabbard said that she never had possession or control of the whistleblower complaint, and therefore she could not have hidden it. The complaint was held and secured for months by Biden-era Intelligence Community Inspector General Tamara Johnson, who was responsible for it during that time. And the first time that she saw the complaint was when she had to review it to provide guidance on how it should be securely shared with Congress. Gabbard said that as vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Warner knows that whistleblower complaints that contain highly classified and compartmented intelligence must be secured in a safe, even if they contain baseless allegations like this one. And the responsibility rests with the Biden-era Inspector General Tamara Johnson. And that responsibility was later continued by her successor, Inspector General Chris Fox. Gabbard said that after Fox hand-delivered the complaint to the Gang of 8, it was returned to a secure safe where it remains due to its sensitivity. And Gabbard said, either Warner knows this and is misleading the public, or he does not understand the process, so that means that he is unqualified to serve in the Senate. Gabbard also said that the 21-day deadline only applies when an Inspector General deems a complaint both urgent and credible, which she said was not the case here. Also, according to the Wall Street Journal, an Inspector General representative said that some allegations were found not credible and others remain under review. And Gabbard said that she was first told to provide security guidance on December 4th by Fox, since that was outlined in his letter to Congress. and she then took immediate action to provide security guidance to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, who shared the complaint and the related intelligence with the relevant members of Congress last week. In closing, Gabbard once again accused Warner of spreading lies and baseless claims for political gain, and she said that it undermines national security. But in response, Warner's office said that Gabbard's post was an inaccurate attack that's entirely on brand for someone who has already repeatedly proven that she's unqualified to serve as DNI. But Senator Tom Cotton said that he reviewed the whistleblower complaint and he agreed with the Inspector General that it's not credible. He said that the Inspector General and the Office of the DNI handled and transmitted the material properly under the law. Cotton said that the complaint appears to be a political effort to undermine policies that critics oppose, not a legitimate claim of waste, fraud, or abuse. Massive layoffs at the Washington Post have caused an internal shakeup. Its publisher, Will Lewis, announced his resignation on February 8th. Lewis wrote in an email to staff, "After 2 years of transformation at the Washington Post, now is the right time for me to step aside." In his email, Lewis claimed that he wanted to thank his boss, Amazon.com founder Jeff Bezos, for his support, and that there is no better owner of the organization than Bezos. Lewis wrote in the message to staff saying, "During my tenure, difficult decisions have been taken in order to secure the sustainable future of the Post so it can, for many years ahead, publish high-quality, nonpartisan news to millions of customers each day." Lewis was previously chief executive of Dow Jones and the publisher of the Wall Street Journal. He was named chief executive of the Washington Post in 2023. He faced criticism from subscribers and employees as he tried to turn around the daily's financial losses. Lewis's tenure had numerous obstacles, and in 2024 he clashed with then chief editor Sally Busby, which led to the departure of Busby. Lewis then attempted to appoint British journalist Robert Winnett, but he withdrew from the appointment due to an ethical controversy involving payment for news tips during his tenure in the UK. Then executive editor Matt Murray then took up the Post. Lewis's comments at a staff meeting that the Post had to change because not enough people read your work provoked a backlash within the editorial department, further deepening tensions between management and the editorial team. The Washington Post Guild said in a statement, "Will Lewis's exit is long overdue." The union is also calling for Jeff Bezos, the owner of the newspaper, to immediately reverse the layoffs or put the newspaper up for sale. Union representatives questioned whether Bezos was still willing to commit resources to the news media, but Bezos called the leadership change an extraordinary opportunity. He said, "The Post has an essential journalistic mission and an extraordinary opportunity. Each and every day our readers give us a roadmap to success." Jeff Donofrio, the chief financial officer of the newspaper, will serve as acting publisher and CEO. Donofrio said that the media industry as a whole is facing economic headwinds, but he remains confident that the Post will come out of this. Donofrio wrote on Saturday, "Customer data will drive our decisions, sharpening our edge in delivering what is most valuable to our audiences." Japan held a general election for the House of Representatives yesterday. Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's ruling coalition swept to a single-party majority victory in the critical parliamentary election. This time, Takaichi finally got the popular mandate to pursue her political agenda. Her ruling coalition took at least 3/4 of the seats in the House of Representatives. Her party, the Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, also took 2/3 of the seats, which is the highest number of seats won by a single party in the post-war Japanese general election. This huge advantage allows the LDP to push for a constitutional amendment. Even if the bill is rejected by the Senate, Takaichi will be able to override the Senate's vote with the LDP's overwhelming 2/3 majority of the House of Representatives and have the bill passed and go into effect. Following the announcement of the LDP's victory, Takaichi hinted that she would maintain the status quo in the cabinet and would not make any major changes to the cabinet lineup. She will focus on steadily fulfilling her campaign promises. Observers believe that the LDP's victory in Japan's House of Representatives election has not only reshuffled Japan's politics, but actually the international scene as well, and that Takaichi will join forces with President Trump to end the CCP's threat to East Asia and the world, including Taiwan. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was among the first to congratulate Japan on its LDP victory, hailing it a huge win and emphasizing the good relationship between the high market and President Trump. Japan's strength will help the U.S. position in Asia also. President Trump endorsed Takaichi beforehand, and before the election results were known, President Trump had already announced that Takaichi would visit the White House on March 19th. Takaichi claims to draw inspiration from Britain's Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. Perhaps she can join hands with President Trump to repeat the history of Thatcher and President Reagan in ending the Cold War and ending the Communist Party's threat to East Asia and the world. Of course, we should also pay attention to Takaichi's economic policy. During the election, Takaichi proposed to waive the consumption tax on foodstuffs for 2 years, starting from this year. At that time, it triggered a drop in the price of Japanese government bonds and turmoil in the global stock market. Political observers generally believe that Takaichi's economic blueprint is to create more private consumption and corporate investment through tax cuts and investment in strategic industries in order to drive economic growth and thus reduce the government's debt ratio in the future. Moreover, she emphasized that she would not issue new national bonds, and she would synchronize her efforts to secure fiscal resources. However, it remains to be seen whether her approach will be successful or whether it will trigger another weakening of the yen. Chris Ciccioluna, the head of research at Daiwa Capital Markets Europe, said that the stock market has a lot of confidence in Takaichi's policies. Today, Japan's Nikkei 225 index rose 3.4% to a new all-time high, surpassing the $56,000 mark for the first time in early trading. And the TSE index rose 2.5%. But Ciccioluna expects that the yen will weaken. A formal intervention by Japan's finance ministry is a possibility if the downward pressure on the yen becomes very pronounced. And Yeta Akio, a veteran media personality in Japan, said that the biggest taboo of economic policy is vacillation. Japan has had 9 prime ministers in the past 10 years, so its politics are a mess. Now that Takaichi's party has won, the direction of Japan's politics is very clear, and it will formally enter a long and stable period of governance. In that case, the economic policy will become more stable, at least in the next 2 to 3 years, which will definitely help Japan's economic recovery. Yesterday, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, resigned, taking responsibility for advising Starmer to appoint Peter Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to the United States. McSweeney said in a statement, "The decision to appoint Peter Mandelson was wrong. He has damaged our party, our country, and trust in politics itself. When asked, I advised the Prime Minister to make the appointment, and I take full responsibility for that advice." And today, 1 day later, Starmer's communication director, Tim Allen, also resigned. Allen said in a statement, "I have decided to stand down to allow a new number 10 team to be built. I wish the PM and his team every success." Allen served as an advisor to former Prime Minister Tony Blair from 1992 to 1998. In September of 2025, he was appointed Executive Director of Communications at Downing Street. Starmer admitted that he had been aware of Mandelson's close association with Epstein when he appointed him ambassador to the United States. This has led to Starmer now facing the worst crisis of confidence in his 18 months in office, even though the Prime Minister said that none of us knew the depth of the darkness of Mandelson's relationship with Epstein when he was selected for the role. In addition, a source revealed that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had raised concerns and reminded the British of relevant background issues before Mandelson was appointed as the British ambassador to the U.S. But the specific content of the communication has not yet been fully confirmed by the official. And Starmer had fired Mandelson in September from his ambassadorial job over earlier revelations about his Epstein ties, but it was too late. Starmer is now facing a political storm and questions about his judgment, not only for the Mandelson appointment, but also for his attempts to establish good relations with the Chinese Communist Party. A number of lawmakers have called for Starmer to resign. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition Conservative Party, said Keir Starmer has to take responsibility for his own terrible decisions.
But let's turn to China. Of course Britain should engage with China, even though the Chancellor wasn't allowed to go, even though they are an authoritarian state who seek to undermine our interests, even though they spy on us, sometimes within the walls of this building, even though they fund regimes around the world hostile to our country, they are a fact of life, a global power and an economic reality. So let me be clear. It is not the Prime Minister engaging with China that we take issue with. What we are criticising is his supine and short-termist approach. I'm sure the Prime Minister means well, but his negotiating tactic has always been to give everything away in the hope that people will be nice to him in return. Before the Prime Minister even got on the plane, he'd already shown that he would do anything to demonstrate his good relationship with China. But China uses every interaction to improve its own position.
And earlier today, Badenoch accused Keir Starmer of blowing around like a plastic bag in the wind, and he demanded Starmer to resign if he can't do the job. And last night, several backbench Labour MPs called for Starmer to go. Even cabinet allies appeared to admit that Keir Starmer's future is in jeopardy. But a Downing Street spokesperson has insisted that the Prime Minister is not resigning and that he is concentrating on the job at hand. Also, Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar held an unscheduled press conference today to call for Starmer to resign.
It is so obvious that we desperately need change in Scotland. And in 3 months' time, the opportunity to get rid of a failing SNP government is one that is too important to be missed. We cannot allow the failures at the heart of Downing Street to mean the failures continue here in Scotland. Because the election in May is not without consequence for the lives of Scots. We have an NHS crisis where too many Scots can't access the treatment they need and when they need it. We have a housing emergency with more than 10,000 Scottish children homeless right now. And we have too many young people not feeling safe at school or on our streets or missing out on the opportunities they deserve. And we have an SNP government that is addicted to secrecy and cover-ups with devastating consequences. That's why I have to be honest about failure wherever I see it. The situation in Downing Street is not good enough. There have been too many mistakes. They promised they were going to be different, but too much has happened. Have there been good things? Of course there have, many of them, but no one knows them and no one can hear them because they're being drowned out.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.